And so the first question that the priest asked, the first question that the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But then the Good Samaritan came by, and he reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him?
On March 13th, 2004, at 4:33 p.m., Jimmy Dunne, a Vietnam vet, and his wife were returning from a birthday party when they witnessed and stopped to help the victims of a 3-car crash in the small town of Port Jefferson Station, New York. Jimmy helped because he was a good Samaritan and he knew CPR. While Jimmy gave his statement to police officers, a brand new Subaru driven by Lisa Lloyd crashed into the police barricades and slammed into Jimmy. She kept going with Jimmy's head smashed into the windshield until the fire chief ran alongside her car, dove through the window, and threw her car into park. Jimmy was catapulted 30 feet into the air, landing on his head, severely injuring him. His life changed forever in that split moment. Jimmy's head was fractured in 2 places and he suffered a brain hemorrhage. He plunged into a coma for a month and required brain surgery to treat his injuries. He now requires round-the-clock nursing care due to his injuries. Lisa Lloyd later pleaded guilty to second-degree assault while driving a car while impaired on drugs. Today, the Insider Exclusive will show you Jimmy Dunne's truly courageous struggle to recover, how Stephen Murphy, former top homicide prosecutor for the Brooklyn DA's office, and Dan O'Toole, partners at the law firm of Block, O'Toole and Murphy, got Jimmy justice with a record verdict of $32.7 million, the largest non-medical malpractice personal injury award in Long Island history. I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from New York City at the law firm of Block, O'Toole and Murphy. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dan O'Toole and Stephen Murphy to this show. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks, Steve.
Tell us a little bit about what type of lawyers you guys are.
Well, we specialize in personal injury cases, catastrophic personal injury cases. Each of us comes to the firm with a different history and different experience. I started practicing law in 1992, and for the first 4.5 years of my career, I practiced on the other side of the equation. I did insurance defense work on behalf of the insurance companies. I'm grateful for that experience in that it taught me how to look at things from the other side and how they evaluate cases. I transitioned into plaintiff's work in 1996 when I tried a case to verdict in Nassau County. It was an interesting case involving a guy who had been a convicted felon. And frankly, no one wanted to try his case. And the state of New York didn't want to pay fair value on the case.
This was an insurance case?
Now, it was actually a medical malpractice case.
And why didn't they want to try his case?
They felt that they couldn't sell him to a Nassau County jury. It's known to be a conservative venue, and frankly, he was convicted for cocaine distribution, and they don't like to give people second chances sometimes, or at least that was the thought process at the time.
Both of you try cases based on a contingency basis, don't you?
Correct.
In other words, you take on cases that if you don't win, you don't get paid. So you got to make sure that you have good cases. And you have kind of an interesting background, Stephen. You were a homicide prosecutor in Brooklyn for, what, 7 or 8 years?
Yes.
Why the change?
Well, I don't know if it is a change. The truth is this, is that I became a lawyer because I wanted to help people. And I was a prosecutor because I wanted to help people. I wanted to fight for people who needed a voice. There's at least my thought is this, is that there's not much of a transition from doing what I did and doing what I do. It's all about advocating for a victim. Whether it's a person who was shot dead on the streets in Brownsville, or it's someone who's in a wheelchair for the rest of their life because of a construction accident.
Right.
You're fighting for someone who needs your help.
We're going to be talking later to the son of one of your clients, Jimmy Dunne, and they're going to, I think, talk very much. They become part of your family, don't they? The clients.
The people that we represent do become part of our family. When they come in through these doors at this firm, this is their home. And they get to know the the secretary, the receptionist, the paralegal that works on their case, just as well as they do the lawyers.
Let's talk about this case. This is the Dunne versus Lloyd case, correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the case itself. I understand it was the largest personal injury award on Long Island, wasn't it?
That's true.
$23.7 million, correct?
You're not being generous enough, Steve. It was $32.7 million.
32, okay. Tell us a little bit about the case.
The case was a tragedy, and it was a tragedy that we were fortunate enough, and I say that with some hesitation, but we were fortunate enough to be able to help a great, great family and a great man. Jimmy Dunne was 56 at the time of this accident, and it really showed the measure of the man, how this accident happened. He was with his wife, he was leaving a family party, and he saw a completely unrelated accident. And this is a guy who could have kept on going straight and went home, but what he did was he stopped.
Right.
He stopped, he got out of his car to help these people who were involved in a collision, and he waited there for the police to arrive, he waited for the ambulance to arrive, he waited for the fire department to help because there was an oil spill.
Yeah.
And this was a giving person. This was a man who went out of his way to help others.
He also knew CPR, didn't he?
He did.
So he was there to try and help too.
He was there as what the newspapers described. He was a complete good Samaritan. He, unfortunately, was in the wrong place at the wrong time because the defendant in the case, a woman by the name of Lisa Lloyd, drove through a police barricade, almost knocked down and killed a fireman, and ran into Jimmy at the accident scene. Drove her car right into the scene of this accident and hit Jimmy and sent them flying in the air.
And as a result of that, what happened?
He sustained catastrophic injuries, terrible brain injuries. This loving, caring man's life was completely changed.
Right.
It's something that really, really gives you pause because this was a tremendous person, and every day for the rest of his life,
right.
It's completely different. And it's different for him, it's different for his family.
When this case was initially referred to you, what grabbed you immediately about the case?
Well, the first time that I sat down with his family, it was just the warmth of the family, the optimism that they had, despite every reason not to have it. And it was a case that I said, it cries out for our firm to get involved. And it was a case that I immediately said right away, I need O'Toole on this case, we've got to try this case together because this family needs our firm and they need our help.
And the goodness of the man was striking also. I mean,
Yeah.
Jimmy, his whole life had been about giving, even to the circumstances which caused the accident. This is a man who fought in Vietnam for his country, and just all throughout his life, all he did was give. So I think the depth of the tragedy struck both myself and Steve immediately, that, gosh, this is, of all people, and I think also we both felt at the time, man, we would have loved to have known this man before this accident, because one of the really sad elements of the case is that Jimmy, if you were to meet him today, he would be able to engage you on some level, but Jimmy doesn't have the ability to make new memories. And think about that for a moment.
Right now.
How profoundly sad that is, that your grandson has his first communion.
Yeah.
And Jimmy could sit there and watch it, but he can't remember it 5 minutes after it happened. And that's just something that I think struck us both very deeply, the sadness of that. And juxtaposing that sadness to the unbelievable beauty of this family has
Right.
just been a real gift for both of us.
There's a lot of personal injury accidents out there. Walk us through a little bit about, you decide you want to take on this case because of the clients, okay? What's the strategy in taking on a case like, what do you have to do?
It's pretty simple. I don't know if I'd call it a strategy, it's what this firm is built on. It's taking good people who need your help and fighting until there's nothing left to fight for, to make sure you get everything you can for them, everything that they deserve.
Now this case, actually you sued Lisa Lloyd. She had an insurance company coverage.
She had a minimal insurance policy.
But there was somebody else too.
Yeah, there was the dealership. And again, the tragedy is very deep. She was dating someone who worked at a dealership, a Dodge dealership. And that person who was working at the dealership and Lisa Lloyd had taken drugs on the morning of this accident. So she was on both painkillers and marijuana at the time of the accident.
I understand that was her boyfriend.
Yes.
That's
right?
correct.
And he worked at the dealership.
Exactly.
And
And
they-
he nonetheless gave her keys to a
Yeah.
vehicle of
did
the
he,
dealership.
Did he rent it to her, or just, he did?
Yeah.
So he knew what condition she was in and everything.
That's right.
Did you brought him to court?
He would, no, because the way New York works
Yeah.
is cases are bifurcated. In other words, there's two different parts of a
Yeah.
trial. By the time we were introduced to the case, the liability portion had already been decided on by motions.
Yes.
So the only issue really was
How much?
what was the extent of the damages and what
Right.
was fair.
Okay, and how was that determined?
Well, the amount of damages is a number of different components as to damages. There's past pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
What has Jimmy Dunne gone through from the moment of the accident until the day of the verdict?
Yeah.
Then there's future pain and suffering, where we take the jury, if you will, on a journey as to what his future is going to hold.
Mm-hmm.
And that's future pain and suffering. There's also a protection in New York for the spouse of someone who's tragically injured like Jim. And that's what's called a loss of services claim, which we brought on behalf of Mrs. Dunne. And that looks at what's happened to the marriage, what's the loss to the marriage. And
Yes.
the law doesn't really allow for a broken heart. What is the value of a broken heart? Because certainly Mrs. Dunne's heart is broken every day when she sees her husband.
Yes.
But while it doesn't in words give that cause of action, it does allow it through the loss of services claim.
Right.
And it basically says, what's happened to the marriage? How has it changed?
In a case like this, clearly Lisa Lloyd was, high on drugs. I'm sure they tested her at the time. She was clearly liable, okay, as well as the dealership that gave her the car. What is the defense strategy in a case like this? What are they trying to do?
It was, this is what's fair.
And how did they determine what this is fair?
Well, that's an interesting question. What we thought, and obviously what the jury thought, was that this was a man that deserved the best.
Yeah.
He deserved the best care, the best opportunities, to give him the most opportunity to succeed,
Yes.
to recover. And the defense strategy was, well, I can look at a book, I can look on the internet, and I can find something cheaper.
Right.
In fact, I can give you the cheapest alternative, and that's what you should give him.
He was at a point in time at the Veterans Hospital, right?
Still is.
He still is. What did they want to offer him in terms of treatment?
Well, what they wanted to give Jimmy, and the defense suggested was appropriate, is basically a baseline treatment. And I know the Dunne family is grateful to the Veterans Administration for the good care he's gotten there. But
Yeah.
what we wanted to do was get Jimmy the best possible care, because, while the injury has an immediate effect upon him, it also has a huge de-energizing impact on the family. Imagine that you're Mrs. Dunne or one of the boys, his sons, and you have to go to the facility every day to talk to Jimmy, to engage him. Now, you
Yeah.
need to engage him in order to bring him to his best level of alertness. But that can be exhausting. So what we wanted to do, and this is through the good help that we received from a preeminent life care planner, is we wanted to stimulate Jimmy with other types of therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, things that would engage him such that when Mrs. Dunne came to visit him, Jimmy was already in a lighter mood. He
Yeah.
was more aware and alert. And we also wanted to try different medications. When I say we, I mean the physicians taking care of him, to try different modalities of treatment to get Jimmy to as good as he could be. Not just okay and surviving, but as good as he can be.
Let's just talk about some of the expenses. You had a $32.7 million verdict. Past medical damages were something like almost $800,000. Future is estimated to be something like $5 million.
Just under $5 million.
Yeah. How did they come up with these numbers? You mentioned life care expert.
Well, what we do is, as a practice, our firm, we like to retain the best and the brightest, no matter where they are in the country or in the world. In this case, we retained a gentleman who is in charge of the North Shore Hospital System in their rehabilitation department. And we had him look at Jimmy from head to toe and evaluate him and say, look at this man as if he's your father.
Right.
Let's get him the best possible gold standard treatment. And that's how we look at every one of our cases. And he did that. He studied Jimmy's record, looked at his chart, looked at the therapies he had received, the progress he had shown when he was given certain modalities, and how he went downhill when he didn't receive things. And he came up with what we call a life care plan.
Okay.
What would give Jimmy the best shot at the fullest type of life?
Now, part of that verdict was pain and suffering. I think it was $8 million for Jimmy and for past pain, pain suffering, and 15 million for future pain. How is that determined?
That's really just measuring the life, what it was before,
Yeah.
and what that person has endured since this accident. And it's really, you're looking at two different human beings. There was the man who was the good husband, the engaging father, the good friend, the life of the party. And now there's a person who is a shell of what he was. And I think it was really a reflection of the jury saying, what is human life worth? And
Right.
what's the difference in the quality of this person's life?
And fortunately, we have with us his son, who is going to join us right now and talk a little bit about that whole experience. So let's bring him on right now. I want to welcome Brian Dunne, son of Jimmy Dunne. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
You've gone through a lot with your dad, haven't you?
Yes, yes, sir.
And he was a Vietnam vet like me. He was a retired railroad worker, correct?
Yep.
Commander of the American Legion post, wasn't he?
Yes, that's correct.
Tell us when that happened. What was your first awareness of what happened and how, the whole experience, how it went through you?
Well, our whole lives changed in one day.
I mean, you got this call from somebody.
Actually, I was playing with my son, and it was early in the morning. He had woke me up, so it seemed like a normal day. I was playing with him on the bed, and my mother had gotten a call, said that he hadn't come home, and she was very concerned, and from there, everything escalated, and, it was a matter of trying to locate him.
Your dad?
Yeah, my father.
Where was he immediately after the accident?
They had shipped him off from one hospital to another hospital, and he had been, at the time of the accident, he had no identification on him, so they didn't know how to contact any family, so he was actually listed as a John Doe for hours before we identified him.
Wow.
So that was very hard to deal with.
But your mother was with him at the time of the accident, correct?
She was, yes. She was dropping him off at the American Legion, and there was an accident at the corner that had happened prior to them getting to the American Legion.
Yeah.
So my father, he's a natural helper. He likes to assist. He told my mother, "Why don't you go home? I'll help out with the accident." And she had left.
Yeah.
That was the last time she saw him.
To show the change that your dad has gone through, we are now putting on the screen a video of your dad prior to the accident. Tell us a little bit about your dad.
Before the accident, he was great. He was the focus of attention in the room. He was just the party guy. He loved to just make jokes and keep people happy. He was very much aware of everybody around him all the time, and people just tended to gravitate to him. He was a very likable guy, surrounded by his friends all the time, and just a great man.
And now, after the accident, when is the first time you saw him?
I saw him the day after the accident. Like I
Right.
said, we didn't know anything had happened to him for hours later. And when I had seen him, he was almost unrecognizable.
Because of the injuries to his head?
Yes.
And what did the doctors tell you at that time?
That was the hardest part originally, is that they really didn't know if he was going to survive at all. They really were concerned with him just surviving the next few hours. He was so badly injured that just his face and his head was swollen, and he had tubes and wires all over him. And we almost walked past his room when we were going up to the floor that he was on, and then just kind of stopped in our tracks.
He was in a coma for about a month, wasn't he?
Yes, that's correct. He was in a coma for a few months. They never actually listed him as out of the coma because it was such a progressive thing. It wasn't like he didn't just wake up and open his eyes. It was just slowly one small event after another, which then they finally said he was coming around.
What were some of the first indications when you saw this coming around?
Well, that was really very hard because he when he was in the brain injury hospital in Kings Park, just squeezing our hand. If we were talking to him, he would kind of maybe just squeeze our hand a little bit tighter, and we wanted so bad to think that that was a sign that he was coming out, but you're never 100% sure. Sometimes it could just be reflex, but we took everything as a good sign, and you know, eventually he started. You know, he would open his eyes, and you know, it was a very big deal for us when they got him sitting up in a chair. It was, you know, things like that we take for granted.
Now, how long has it been since the accident?
The accident was in 2004.
So it's been like 5 years.
Right.
And how is he today?
Today he's leaps and bounds better than what we had hoped for at the time. He talks. He can walk with a walker if we're close by. He gets a good amount of therapy now.
Good.
So
he's at the Veterans Hospital?
He is at the Veterans Hospital in Stony Brook, and they take very good care of him.
How often do you get to see him?
I see him a lot. I see him. It's a little bit hard for me. I have small kids, and the environment's a little bit harder for them to take in. But I see him a few times a week. My mother has him home a lot, so you know, he stays over the night a few nights a week. And it's a good balance for my family because he gets the medical care that he needs around the clock, and yet we still have him available to us whenever we can.
Right. How's your mom doing through this whole thing?
She's much better. It's very, very hard for her to handle while it was all going on, but she's very strong. She does handle things in her own way, but she's doing much better now. She's happier. She's more comfortable. She can see him in a setting that's more comfortable for her and him, as opposed to just being at the mercy of the hospitals. Yeah.
Now your lawyers, your dad's lawyers, Dan O'Toole and Stephen Murphy, got the largest personal injury verdict in Long Island history. What do you think about these lawyers?
They're the best thing that happened to my family. They are absolutely wonderful people, not just as lawyers, but they've become good friends. And without them, this would have turned out far different than how it turned out. It was amazing. A lot
of people have a perception of a lawyer. He just, you know, takes on the case, tries it, and forgets about the clients. Not the case with Stephen and Dan, is it?
Not at all. Not at all. It was never felt, not for 1 second, like they were just lawyers at all. They were instantly members of the family. They treated us as members of their family. They're just great people. I often hear people say that too, that their lawyers are just that. They're the lawyers. They handle their legal cases, but they're very much involved in all aspects of life. They're very in tune to what's going on and how things are with us.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming to the program.
Thank you very much.
Best wishes to your dad.
Thank you.
Brian is quite a great guy, isn't he? I mean, you know, to go through this whole experience with his dad. A lot of people suffer, you know, personal injury, and they seek out lawyers to try and help them out. What kind of advice do you have to anybody who's been in a catastrophic accident? You know, they've been injured in a car accident, construction. What kind of advice do you have for them?
You better pick the right lawyer. You better do your research, do your homework, and find the lawyer or the firm that's going to be the right fit for you.
How do you find that right lawyer?
I think that there's a lot of available information to the general public, whether it's websites, whether it's conversations with people to share experiences, former clients, friends. I think that the world is different today, and people have opportunities to learn a lot more about who they retain and who they don't retain than they did in years past.
Right. When you're in an accident, you know, work-related or whatever, what are some of the immediate steps that you should take if you can? You know, like getting witnesses' names, photographs, that sort of thing.
Well, first and foremost, obviously, seek medical attention if you need it.
Yeah.
And thereafter, yes, fill out any reports that are asked of you, inquire as to the existence of witnesses. But the truth is, you really need to get on the stick and get a qualified law firm working for you as soon as possible, because you can be certain that the powers that be on the other side are undertaking their investigation immediately and doing everything in the world they can to bury you and your case. So as much as we'd like not to have to seek out legal representation early on because we'd like to just focus on our own medical condition, the truth is you need to start fighting for yourself as soon after as you possibly can, because the other side is getting their defense together almost from the time that unfortunately you fall to the ground. So you need to assemble the right team for you. And the advice I would give someone who is, God forbid, hurt catastrophically is make sure you're getting the right guy and make sure there's somebody that actually has delivered in the past. There's a lot of different people out there advertising themselves to be heavy hitters and great lawyers. But the truth is, what have they done in the past? What verdicts have they gotten? That's something that you really should be concerned with, because there are many different people marketing themselves as attorneys, but in truth, they're not actually attorneys. They're just passing their cases along to other firms. One of the primary commitments we have as a firm is we keep our promises. We want to make sure that we don't take on too many cases. We're very selective about what we take because we want to make sure we keep our promises to each person and each family that's hurt. As much as we're trial lawyers, we're also counselors, and we spend an awful lot of time talking to our clients about the stresses they feel, and financial stresses, emotional stresses, every stress you can imagine. And we want to make sure we're there for them to walk them through those problems.
You know, in a case like Jimmy's, you know, he had these humongous medical expenses right away. There's other people that undergo the same sort of thing. Before the case is settled, how does the hospital and the doctors, how do they handle it? They just keep billing you and not looking for payment right away?
It's something that you have to develop relationships with the facilities and come to an understanding that the only way that they're going to be fairly compensated for the services they provide, and they should be, is you come up with a payment plan, or you come up with an idea that they're going to be paid at the conclusion of the case.
Okay. You brought up a very interesting point. There's a lot of lawyers out there who are willing to take on a case, but they look at it for settling it as quickly as they can so they can get some money for themselves, basically.
Absolutely.
Your law firm is willing to go all the way, go to trial, whatever it takes to get the best result that the client deserves.
That's a very important point. And our reputation in the industry is that we will not be afraid to spend money. We will spend as much as it takes, and we'll work as hard as required.
I think another thing bespeaks of your law firm is the fact that other lawyers refer cases to you, don't they?
They do. And the truth is this, results matter. And anyone can make promises, but you got to keep them. And the persons that are looking to hire a law firm or look to lawyers to represent them, you got to look at what I would describe as the back of their baseball card. Look at what they've done and whether they can deliver on the promises that they're making.
Absolutely. There's no learning curve. And that's a beautiful thing for us and for our clients. We're not some kids off the street that they're wondering, gee, what are they going to do when they get in the courtroom? They know very well what we're going to do in the courtroom.
Well, I want to thank both of you very much for helping Jimmy and being on the show.
Thank you,
Steve. And thank you very much, too.
Pleasure.
Thank you for watching. You can get more information about the guests, the lawyers, and the issues at insiderexclusive.tv. Thank you.
Say I die, I'm gonna punch him in the eye. If that eye shine black and blue, I'm gonna punch him in the other one too.
All right.